jazzed as hell to introduce to you Ben Wickler. He's the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Ben, out on the road working hard. Thank you, sir. Welcome. How you feeling today, man?
Fired up, man. This is it. This is the final sprint, and the wind is at our backs. This is an election that it seems like Trump doesn't want to win, and I think Kamala Harris really wants to win. I think the public wants Kamala Harris to win, and all that points to, I'd much rather be a Dem in Wisconsin than a Republican at this moment.
Yeah, Ben Wickler, the early voting numbers have just been through the roof. Is there anything that you can take out of that data?
The biggest thing that jumps out to me is in Milwaukee, in the city of Milwaukee, 13% of the early votes in person were cast by people who same day registered at the polls. Meaning this is a whole bunch of people who are showing up, registering and voting for the first time. In Dane County, it's 10%. And
Wow.
these are big numbers. These are people who've never been polled because unregistered voters don't get polling calls from people
Right.
polling registered voters. So these are folks that are not on anyone's radar, but I think that those are very likely folks who are going out and voting for Kamala Harris. So I just feel like something's happening here. And, we got to sprint through the tape. We take nothing for granted, but it's because we're taking nothing for granted. And I think the Republicans are taking something for granted that I think the Democrats are going to win.
Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Milwaukee, Madison, generally, obviously, if you're going to flip a coin, those would be definitely Democratic-leaning voters, statistically speaking. What about some of the other areas, the Fox Valley, perhaps, the Northwest? Are you seeing any numbers or anything coming from there that would give you more hope?
Well, here's the interesting thing. There's clearly a lot of early voting happening by Republicans. In terms of, our modeling where which party has been favored in different places around the state. But if you look at where the Republican votes are coming from in the early vote period, they're the places where Trump did the worst in his own presidential primary. There's a fascinating map that goes county by county and looks at where these early vote surges are. They're the places that were rejecting Trump when Trump was on the ballot against Nikki Haley. I think a lot of these early votes are being cast by people who don't want Trump to get reelected. Even people who've been Republican in the past. And I've been in 43 counties across Wisconsin in the last 18 days. Every place I've gone, I've asked everyone in the room. Yeah, I'm a little exhausted.
That's
but
amazing,
everywhere,
dude.
everywhere I go, I ask who here is seeing more Democrats voting for Trump and who's seeing more Republicans voting for Harris. And everywhere, almost everyone says it's more Republicans voting for Harris than the other way around. I think that the pendulum's swinging our way. And I think a lot of those votes that you might think are Republican early votes are actually Harris votes. I think the Republicans need to, for them to have a prayer, I think they would have to blow it out on election day. And I don't think they have to get out the vote infrastructure to do it the way that we're doing it.
Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvi Show. That's Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of the state of Wisconsin. Big election tomorrow. 24 hours and then plus, a few more hours, 8 o'clock, the polls will close. So my math says 27 hours before this thing wraps up. Ben, what's the game plan for you and to get out the vote, folks? Is it time to coast, or are you still working like all day, all night, then all through tomorrow as well?
All day. Hopefully there's at least a wink of sleep at night, and then the polls open at 7 a.m. So the work starts tomorrow bright and early. A lot of folks are going to vote before they go to work. Some will take a break during work. Some will do it at lunch, and then the polls are open till 8. So if it's 7:50 and you live within 5 minutes of a polling location, and you realize you haven't done it yet, go get in line. If you're in line, they have to let you vote. If you're in line, stay in line, as we say. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that nobody leaves that line, because all the way through the end, this could absolutely come down to the wire.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's more likely that things are swinging our way, so it doesn't come down to the wire, than it is that it's swinging Trump's way. But we know that 4 of the last 6 presidential races here has come down to less than 1 percentage point. So we're taking nothing for granted, and we're gonna make sure everyone that we can find is going to text everyone that they can find to get them to the polls and cast their ballot, because that could be the vote that saves democracy.
Ben, I see that the RNC is being reported in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel filing lawsuit in Milwaukee. They have concerns about the amount of poll watchers that will be allowed into the room. The reporting seems to indicate that they were all kind of already they're going to file this thing no matter what. Regardless of the outcome of this, we know that there's going to be, if 2020 is any indication, Ben, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. What can people do to make sure that their vote counts and to have faith in our election system?
So the most important thing is to win by as much as possible, because if we can win by more than 1 percentage point, there's no recount, there's no endless lawsuits to try to disqualify ballots that were lawfully cast in order to effect a recount. The best way to prevent an election from being messed with is to win big. The other thing we know is that when it came down to the tiny number of votes in the year 2000, in one state that could tip the whole country, that's when it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's when the U.S. Supreme Court decided that George W. Bush should be the president, even though he got less votes, as we later learned, than Al Gore in Florida, the state that tipped the country. Wisconsin was the second closest state that year. So we don't want this to come down to one state. We don't want this to come down to one vote. We want to win by as much as we can. That said, the person who certifies the election in the state of Wisconsin is someone who believes deeply in democracy. His name is Governor Tony Evers. And we have a bipartisan Wisconsin Elections Commission that is just trying to make sure the election works smoothly. The state Supreme Court believes in democracy. The majority there is all folks who will respect the will of the voters. It's not like the scenario that would have happened if Dan Kelly had gotten on the Supreme Court. Janet Protasewicz is there. So if this is an election that comes down to certification in Wisconsin, I'm confident about the result. But I don't have a lot of faith in the U.S. Supreme Court at this point. We've seen them, jump on board the Trump train every chance they get. So let's win as many places as possible by as much as possible. The other nice side effect, if we do that, the election will be called a little earlier, so people might actually get some sleep. But I'm expecting to be up till 4 or 5 in the morning on election night, because that's how long it'll take to count the last absentee ballots in Milwaukee, and go all the way through the tape.
Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of the state of Wisconsin. I did see that 105,000 absentee ballots in the city of Milwaukee at the main counting area. And because of a Wisconsin current law that could have been changed, there was a bipartisan effort to change that so they could actually start counting those absentee ballots, those many, 105,000, as far as I know, absentee ballots prior to tomorrow. Well, they're not going to get that number until well after midnight, my understanding, Ben. What's your impression on this? We could have addressed this. To me, this is going to be used as additional fodder for the next when they're going to challenge the election. I guarantee you're going to see a tweet from Truthy on Trump said, Milwaukee just dropped 105,000 and 82,000 went for Harris. It's fraud. They're going to say that, and it seems to me they allowed this to happen when they could have changed it. Ben, what's your thought on the Milwaukee absentee ballot counting?
Well, it's exactly as you say. It's a Republican plan that they put into effect to make sure that the ballots would not be counted early at the same time as the other votes, to make sure that this is a middle of the night situation. In other states, including very red states, they count the ballots very quickly, and then Republicans killed the bill that would have allowed that to happen here. So they can complain all they want. They can say whatever conspiracy theories they want. It's a free country. As long as Trump loses, it'll be a free country. So they have the right to do that. It won't affect the outcome. The outcome is determined by who people actually vote for. And, I have no question in my mind that Tony Evers will not be bamboozled by a right-wing talk radio host claiming that just because a ballot was counted later, that it doesn't count. This is a democracy where the people decide who the leaders are. And whatever flood of disinformation we get, we're going to hold strong for the will of the voters. If it's Trump, we will honor the will of the voters. Our goal is to make sure that it's not Trump, that it's Kamala Harris who wins Wisconsin, who wins this country, that she is certified as the electoral winner. And by the way, when we win the House majority, that means that Michael Johnson, who was part of the fake elector plot in the 2020 elections, that he's not in charge of the process in the U.S. House of Representatives on January 6, 2025. That's another reason why I don't want Derek Van Orden to be in the U.S. House in 2025. So we win the House majority. That is another way of protecting the outcome and making sure that the will of the people choose the leaders of the land.
Ben Wickler, the gender gap, along with the early vote, there's seemingly a huge gender gap. Your comments on that, and are there any other specifics, any other groups, any areas that you find hopeful?
So the gender gap is, I think, maybe the central story in this election. What we see is in absentee ballots, in the ballots cast on election day, more women are voting than men. And if we look in polls, women support Harris more than they support Trump. Now, it's also the case that in polls, men support Trump more than they support Harris, but they're just not voting as much. And so the gender gap might actually wind up being the whole story. Now, we're not, again, not taking anything for granted.
Yeah.
But one thing that's so striking to me is that Republicans keep pointing to the fact that there's a lot of votes that have been cast in, say, Waukesha County as evidence that they're getting a big lead in the early vote. But look who's casting those votes. It's disproportionately women. And there's a reason why Kamala Harris came to Waukesha County in January to launch her Fight for Reproductive Freedom tour and has been back since. It's because there's a ton of people in Waukesha County, just like in every other part of the state, that think the government shouldn't be overriding people's personal medical decisions and telling women what to do with their bodies. So just because someone lives in an area that's been disproportionately Republican, it does not mean that every vote that comes out of that area is a vote for Trump. And when the actual ballots are counted, I think Republicans will have to ask themselves whether it's really good idea to rip away fundamental freedoms from half the population. And everyone in America has a stake in reproductive freedom for all. So this is a losing strategy. Republicans showed us their true colors when they refused to repeal the 1849 abortion ban. When they were in control of the legislature, the governor called them into session to do it. They did not. Every one of them refused to take a stand, and they're about to pay for it.
Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of the state of Wisconsin. A couple of the congressional races, Ben Peter Barker, certainly pulling for him. Dr. Kristen Larley up in the Green Bay area. But you mentioned the Van Orden Cook race out west. I certainly want to see Democrats in there, but Van Orden's Republican attitude and his behavior has really been offensive to me. How do you liken that race, the Cook-Van Orden race?
Rebecca Cook is sprinting through the finish line. I've seen her at events. She is all over her district. She has ads on the air. She's doing everything she can to make the case to folks. Derek Van Orden released his closing argument pretty visibly intoxicated on Friday night. It was broadcast on television and then has gone totally dark in his social media accounts and hasn't done public appearances. My heart goes out to him. I worry for him as a human being. He should not be in Congress. This is somebody who's does not represent this district well, and he should be attending to his own issues, not screaming at teenagers in public places.
Yeah.
So I do think that district's going to flip. I think our state assembly majority could flip. I think we're going to reelect Tammy Baldwin. I think we're going to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Thank you for all the work you do. Keep working, man. We'll see you here real soon. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Tom.